Someone did something to a wasp's nest because when we first got there, there was like a wasp nest that looked like it was partially burned sitting on like a tree trunk.
I'd actually read a comment on Far Out saying there had been a wasp's nest under the toilet. So I was a little scared to use the toilet there. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. We want to tease our live event that we're doing in Fargo, North Dakota on the 8th of January at 6:30 p.m. at Swing Barrel Brewing with Midwest Outdoors LLC. We'll be talking about our time on the John Muir Trail and also covering some tips for people who are looking to get into backpacking. So if you are local to the area, we would welcome you to join us and would love to hang out with you.
All right. So beyond that, today we're going to be talking about our trip on the Wonderland Trail, obviously, and we're talking about our day going from Granite Creek to Carbon River. This was a really slow morning. I think we were all afraid to get out of our tents and see if there were still thousands of spiders crawling everywhere, getting all up on everything. But when I unzipped the tent, it was nice and sunny out and we were spiderless. So that was a blessing. I looked inside my shoes and everything because I kind of felt like they probably would have taken up residence in there, nested, built their family home. But they did not. So that was some good news to start the morning with. Other than that, we just kind of got all our stuff together super slowly. Rachel's stomach had been bothering her a little bit the night before, which she blames on our dehydrated chili. And it's honestly entirely possible. I feel like I'm just like probably used to the way that it reacts in my stomach. So I'm just like, that's fine. But pretty bold for us to bring that for another person.
Well, and it's funny because we first made this meal and then ate it like 4 times on the Tahoe Rim Trail and loved how it tasted. But it kind of does affect a person in the stomach a little bit. And I feel like it's just been something that I've eaten so many times that I'm like, yep, I'm going to eat this chili and then I'll feel a certain way. And I didn't even think that this could cause Rachel some distress. So we felt bad that she wasn't feeling her best and she powered through as Rachel always does. But she wasn't feeling the best that morning. And it was also interesting because this is their 7th day on trail now. So this is day 7 out of 8 total days. And at this point in a long trip, you're starting to, I don't know, I feel for me at the beginning of a longer trip, you're thinking like, okay, I got to take it day by day because I have a lot longer that I'm going to be walking and living outside. And then you get to the midpoint and then it's kind of like exciting because you're halfway there, but you're kind of excited to, keep advancing through. And then at this point, 7 out of 8 days, you're starting to feel a little bit sad almost, like you're excited to be done with the trail soon, but also it has been such a fun experience that you're realizing it's going to come to an end. So you really want to soak in every opportunity that you can.
Another thing about this trip was we learned something from Rachel. So she told
What? That was such a really cool way to put it.
What do you think I'm about to say?
I have no idea what you're about to say, but I just like it because you're like, another fun thing about this trip is that we learned something from Rachel.
Okay, well,
we'd never learned something from her before.
Okay, well, the thing that we learned specifically related to leave no trace while backpacking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, do you think it's interesting now?
Yes.
Yeah, say yes into the microphone.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, okay. So Rachel was telling us that she had gone backpacking in Montana this summer with some other friends. How dare she? And she learned from them that when you spit out your toothpaste on trail, you're supposed to try to I can't even explain it, but you're supposed to try to disperse it kind of as as you spit your toothpaste out. Molly and I, the very first time we ever went backpacking, we brushed our teeth and we spat our toothpaste on the ground, and it was so disgusting. It just was sitting there, and we realized we didn't know what you're supposed to do with toothpaste in the backcountry. So from that day forward, we promised that we would just swallow our toothpaste because we didn't really know the leave no trace way to handle that. And I don't know why we just never Googled it. And I did Google this, so Rachel is correct per Google, which never is incorrect. You're supposed to kind of spray your toothpaste. And so the very first day she did it, she was kind of, showing us how she goes... And I just started singing the Star Spangled Banner to that for some reason. And so we kind of,
For some reason, it's like the most American thing you could ever do.
I guess that's true. The most American thing you can do is dispose of your toothpaste in a responsible way while backpacking. So that morning we'd been taking in chunks, like a video of me singing the Star Spangled Banner, and then she would very patriotically spit her toothpaste at certain sections of the song. So I'll just include that along with the photos and videos that you can see on Facebook or Instagram from what we talk about today. So that was kind of an interesting little fun thing to learn. We finally packed up all of our gear and everything, and we're ready to go. And I honestly had no real concept of what to expect for today. You know, I kind of had a surprise the day before with that beautiful view of Rainier from Skyscraper Pass. And I think there had been many beautiful views, but I kind of had known what to expect for like Summerland and places like that. And then we were kind of going into something where I just had no expectations, which was kind of fun. Like there was no pressure on the day. I didn't know what kind of views we were going to see. So we leave our camp, and pretty quickly after we left, we were just going downhill kind of in this foresty area. And you kind of, you know, come to the edge of a cliff, I guess, as you are on the trail. And the trees started to thin, and we were able to look out, and we could see across from us just a very rocky surface. And it was kind of like, oh, cool, this is a great view of the mountain. Well, after we looked at it for a little bit, we realized that what we were actually looking down on was a glacier. And it's really neat because glaciers, as they come to sort of their end, they have like all these rocks that sit on top of the glacier. And I don't know if it's just melted back from those, so they're all sitting there, or if it's from, you know, like rocks coming down the mountain. I'm not 100% sure. But it was so crazy because to have that realization of, at first you think you're just looking at, you know, a pile of rocks, to then go like, whoa, we're literally looking down on like a moving glacier that's below us, that's still flowing, still carving, still shaping the landscape. And it was just really neat because then you could start to see crevasses. And I feel like Molly was kind of a little like, oh, what if I just thought that was a rocky area and I was just going across it and then there's all these crevasses. But it was interesting to kind of just really be able to take it in. And as we went down, you were able to get good views of the mountain and the glacier the entire time. So we were just like freaking out with joy. And we were so excited because we knew that, you know, eventually we were going to follow this glacier all the way down and then cross the river that comes from the base of it. It was just a really cool area and some really good views.
And we'd seen a really good view of a glacier when we were on Emerald Ridge on, I believe, our third day on trail. And so this was, we hadn't really been really close and personal with glacier since then. And I think that Mount Rainier, going around it, it's just a very unique hike because you get to be so up close and personal with so many different glaciers, and not in the way where you're climbing the mountain and you're on the like upper glaciers as you're getting closer to the top, but you're lower down in the areas that the glaciers are, you know, flowing and carving, and you're seeing this transition of where the glacier is currently active and then where it is no more, but what it's left behind. So that was just really cool to see. And this was a day where we only hiked 9.5 miles. So it was like a day I'd been looking forward to for a while because we had a string of, I think, 3 pretty hard days where we had either a really long or like a long distance for this trail for our trip, or a day with a lot of elevation gain. And this was a day where we just kind of had fewer miles. So of course we didn't leave the campsite until 11:30 a.m. So we didn't give ourselves a ton of time. But if I were going to choose an area along the northern part of Mount Rainier to just like admire this view of the glacier right before we were going to cross the stream that came out of it, would have been a spot that I would have hung out even longer. We crossed the water that was flowing out of the toe of the glacier on a footlog. And then when we got to the other side, we actually did something we hadn't done for several days, which was take off our sun hoodies and wear our tank tops. So it was so sunny out that even though the highs were probably only in the 50s, it felt really nice. And we were going to just enjoy letting the arms soak in a few rays of sun on October 1st in Washington. And how often do you get to do that? I don't know, but we were excited to do it that day. So we got to this point where we had descended kind of along the glacier's path like along the moraine on the side of the glacier, and then we were going to traverse a little bit before we had to ascend and then descend quite a ways. And so as we traversed, it was interesting because the soil was just kind of that volcanic gravel that has been, ground up by glaciers of the past. And there were trees, but it wasn't like a thick forest. And we started to actually see some trees that looked like larches to us with those softer needles, as well as some trees that were just turning yellow, and also some that had dropped their needles already. So we all know about, well, not everyone, but a lot of people in the Pacific Northwest know about the term larch madness, when you seek after those beautiful larches when they turn golden and before they drop their needles for the rest of the year. And here we were even getting the chance to include a couple of larches into our trip around the Wonderland Trail. And we continued on, and then there was some fresh water that was flowing that we could actually use. And it was interesting because there was like one stream that was glacial water, and then another one right after it that was fresh water. And you can tell the difference because the glacial flow was white in color, and then there was better clarity in the water that we could filter. So we filtered there and decided to pause for a little bit. And this is when we noticed that a lenticular cloud was actually forming over the top of Mount Rainier.
So if you've ever seen a lenticular cloud, it's basically a cloud that is super flat looking, that forms kind of above the top of a mountain. And sometimes people call them like the little hat of Mount Rainier, but it's something that forms usually over mountains. I don't remember the exact phenomena for why. And also it's kind of funny because I've read a book about, different clouds and, what kind of weather patterns they could bring. And I told Molly and Rachel, well, I know that a lenticular cloud definitely means that there will probably be rain, but I can't remember if the time frame is between 6 hours or 72 hours. So at some point in the next 3 days, I predict there will be rain here at Mount Rainier. And spoiler alert, I was right. I'm basically a meteorologist. But
I always think that lenticular clouds look like a UFO, like hovering over the mountain.
Honestly, I was really stoked to see one because maybe they are really common, but I don't think they're super common. Like, I don't know that I've ever seen one above the mountain like that. And so we actually just kind of paused to really enjoy it and take it in. And it was cool because you would watch it form, and it was like pieces of clouds would come and attach themselves to it, because you keep thinking, oh, it's going to be this huge cloud that's going to cover the whole mountain. But it wasn't for a long time. Like, pieces of clouds would come and attach themselves, and other pieces would kind of detach themselves. And Molly and I could definitely agree that if we were on the summit of the mountain, we'd probably be feeling like we wanted to come down rather quickly. So we spent kind of a long time really admiring that. Like I said, I don't know how common they are, but I've not seen one before in person. And so it was just really fun to watch one actually form and kind of get a little bigger.
I feel like I maybe saw a small one over Mount Hood at some point, but definitely not over Mount Rainier. And it was fascinating because when we first noticed it, it was just this tiny little bit of cloud directly on top of the mountain. And as we watched, it actually grew. And then I think we continued hiking. And then the next time we saw the mountain, which was probably 30 minutes later, it was already covering the top of the mountain pretty significantly. So it was pretty remarkable how quickly it formed.
So we finally were able to tear ourselves away and start hiking uphill for a change. But honestly, this was some really nice trail, which felt amazing because I feel like we had some less pleasant trails here and there. And it was just one that kind of had a almost foresty tread and more of like a beautiful open forest feel. It was really mossy there, kind of in the way that we'd seen at Mount St. Helens, as you are on kind of more of that gravelly, volcanic soil. And so it just was such a beautiful shade of green. And there was also a really cool cave that I saw. And I'm always so curious when I see caves like that as to whether they're from mining or if they're just naturally formed caves. So that was kind of something that I enjoyed seeing. As we went uphill, we came to Mystic Camp, which I had kind of thought, oh, this would be a really cool place to camp at because it's near Mystic Lake. And it was kind of a reality check for me because although the campsite looked nice, The toilet was once again uphill from the campsites, meaning that you would have to go uphill to go to the bathroom, which is always a knock on any camp in our opinion. And then you had to go another like 0.3 or 0.4 of a mile to even reach the lake. So I think it kind of would be one of those things where it'd be hard to motivate yourself, depending on what time you got there, to add the extra 0.4 miles to go to the lake and then go back to camp and all that kind of stuff. So although it was a nice campsite, it was nice because I didn't feel bummed to not be staying there.
And I don't think had we seen anyone at the trail at this point?
We had not seen anyone yet. But as we came to Mystic Lake, we did see another person. And I feel like it almost made me jump a little bit because I'd gotten so into my rhythm of just, it's me, Molly, and Rachel chewing trail in the wilderness. And then all of a sudden there was this other guy there. And I
feel like you kind of surprised him.
Well, yeah, he surprised. It was mutual surprise. No one, I mean, I guess for some reason we weren't expecting there to be anyone else at Mount Rainier today. And I think he was heading the opposite direction from where we were. So I don't think we made too much, we didn't make too much conversation, but kind of just said hello and continued on. And when we got to the lake, I kind of thought we might want to enjoy it, but it was one of those spots on the mountain where the wind was just ripping across the lake and blowing and making it feel so cold. Because when we'd been down by the glacier, it had kind of felt hot. Like we'd had to take off our long sleeve shirts and we'd just wear our tank tops because it was so treeless and sunny right there. But then all of a sudden by Mystic Lake, we were just like freezing. So we decided to go around the lake right away instead of kind of sitting and enjoying it, which we had thought we might. We'd wanted to eat our lunch. So we continued around it, and we did meet 2 more people that we had seen, or that like bringing our grand total of people that we'd seen to 3 for the day. We kept not being able to find a good spot to eat our lunch, and then there was a little uphill, so we thought, well, we'll just push uphill and hopefully find a good vantage point to look at the mountain.
And I'd actually been tracking, I've been using the Far Out app, and I saw that there was an area that was close to the top of our total ascent for the day where they had a little like camera icon, meaning it was a good view. So I was thinking that, okay, since we can't eat at the lake because it's so windy and cold, maybe we can actually catch a decent view of the mountain and eat there. So we continued to ascend, and it got, fairly steep trail, and we were getting closer and closer to where the scenic viewpoint was. And then we all of a sudden kind of just like broke out of the trees to have a pretty unrestricted view of Mount Rainier, which we were on a pretty steep hillside. So there was an area that you could kind of just like plop down and sit like directly off of the trail, but it wasn't like it was like this beautiful level area. However, because we were getting close to the top of the terrain, but we weren't at the top, we were actually perfectly blocked from the wind. So we had a really nice, pleasant lunch. We didn't have tuna.
No trail pizza.
We had trail pizza. That's right. We didn't have tuna at all this trip. So we broke out the trail pizzas, our respective other snacks that we wanted to eat with our lunch. And we actually sat there for a full hour. We watched the lenticular cloud continue to form, and at this point, the top of the mountain was totally covered. We couldn't see it. And there were a lot more clouds in the sky directly around Mount Rainier. It felt like that lenticular cloud was like a magnet, and it was like attracting all the clouds to that area. And so we stayed there basically as long as we had direct sunlight, because it was pretty pleasant with the wind being blocked and the sun on us. And then as soon as the sun started to get blocked by the clouds, we continued on, but we had rested there for about an hour.
And one thing that I would say negative about this seating area was I had sat directly on an anthill, I believe. Those ants were coming at me. They were all over me. And there was really not very much space to sit. So I just kind of took it, took one for the team. Everybody else is enjoying, and I'm just ants all over the legs, ants all over.
You didn't enjoy it at all?
Oh, I didn't enjoy the ants. That'd be weird. I enjoyed sitting there. But so that
ants all over the legs.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the ants. But I will say one thing that was so fun about the view was we could really see like the way that the glacier flowed. You could see how an ice fall would form. You could see like the jumbo below the ice fall where all the ice had fallen. And there was this one glacier that Molly was obsessed with because she was just sure it was going to fall off the mountain at any second. She was like taking more and more zoomed in pictures to try to prove it to me.
And this was actually the night before at Skyscraper Pass, because we had, like an hour at that point to stare at the mountain. And so there was this one area where it like almost looked like a talon of ice from far away, where it looked like it was starting to come over the edge of a rocky outcropping. And when I noticed it, I was like, oh my gosh, Carrie, this is about to fall off the mountain. And I, like Carrie had mentioned, had taken all these zoomed in pictures and was like holding my breath, waiting for this ice to fall. And it never did. And now we're 24 hours almost after that. We're at a different area of the mountain, and I can definitely see that talon of ice still where it was the day before, and it didn't appear to be going anywhere fast, and it certainly did not fall off the mountain on our watch. I ended up purchasing the Gaia Premium app this year because we decided that it was a better app for like creating kind of like off trail routes versus all trails, which was what I had used to create routes in the past. So we finally got to put my Gaia subscription to work, because while we were sitting there as the lenticular cloud was kind of about to obscure the sun, Carrie was using the Gaia app to point out different landmarks on the mountain and different glaciers. And it was really cool because there are a lot of different climbing routes. And so we were able to find the glaciers. Like, do you remember that one face, Carrie, that you said was in a Grey's Anatomy episode? Maybe.
Liberty Ridge, I believe. Yeah. We were able to identify like that and the different glaciers. And then it's kind of fun because we were trying to think of like what could the route possibly be to get to the top of Mount Rainier via those, landmarks. Yeah, we were talking about the Grey's Anatomy episode where like one ice climber swings his ice axe into the head of another one, and they were like, they were going up Liberty Ridge. That's a very complex ridge to climb. And I was like, it does look pretty complex, so I guess Grey's Anatomy got one thing right. We finally left our viewpoint though, and we finished the last 200 or 300 feet of elevation gain that we had to do, and we saw another person there. Her name was Meg, and she was just super happy to be on trail. She was doing it by herself. She took a couple pictures for us. We took a couple pictures for her because there was this really scenic fall colors viewpoint of the mountain. And she told us that she had another friend that she'd met on trail that would be behind us. So we kind of chatted with her and then said goodbye. And then it was time to do our descent. And I would say once we started descending, I felt like we could not see the mountain hardly at all. So I was very thankful that we'd spent all the time that we had looking at the mountain as I sat on my ant spot.
And I still appreciated that we could look at the mountains and that I didn't have nearly as many ants on my legs as my sister. However, then I was like, oh man, Carrie was saying that when the lenticular cloud formed, precipitation would occur in 6 to 72 hours. And at this point, the sky was starting to get pretty dark and it was looking like it was going to rain. And I thought, why did we just sit there and stare at the lenticular cloud instead of making haste to get to our campsite and set up our tent? Because it still has only been a week since we had to spend that entire day in the rain, freezing to death. So I was like, oh man, maybe we made a mistake there. So we were going downhill. We were hoping to make good time before the rain showed up.
So the interesting thing about heading to Carbon River Camp is I thought it would just be a quick and easy descent. But this terrain honestly felt kind of unrelenting. It was pretty steep, I think, and it was relatively rocky, and it just felt like there was really no reprieve for heading downhill on it. And we usually love downhill, but this one just felt for us like it went on a little too long. But it was kind of cool because you did end up on the edge of another cliff where you were able to look at yet another glacier, this time the Carbon Glacier, as we descended. And so it was really fun. I don't know. I think I've just not spent very much time above glaciers, honestly, except for if I was on a mountain already on a glacier. So it was really unique to actually be able to watch it carve the land. And it was kind of interesting because as we got towards the end of the glacier, or the toe of the glacier, there's this hump of gravel that you could see, which kind of marks the end of it because, it as it sits there, it just deposits more and more gravel. But the interesting thing is you could kind of see the recession of the glacier because I started noticing there were more humps the farther you look downstream. So I felt like it really helped me apply it to even other hiking that I've done because I was thinking, oh my goodness, I think that when I look farther, like even farther downstream, I can see where that was a hump. And normally I would have just thought, whatever, that was just a weird geological feature. But I think that, obviously they start to grow grass and have trees on them, but it just made me feel like I really understood the mountain better, which I thought was kind of a cool feeling.
And are those called terminal moraines then, those humps that you were seeing? I think so, because like a lateral moraine is basically what we were walking on. And you know what, Carrie, because it felt so unrelenting to head down to the Carbon River because over 4 miles we lost 3,000 feet of elevation. So that's a pretty, yeah.
And one other thing that was interesting is there were signs, I think, talking about how it was a rockfall area. And so I didn't feel like I really wanted to spend too much time just standing around. Like with areas like that, you kind of need to just move through them efficiently because obviously you can't control if something ever happens, but you can reduce the amount of time that you spend around a hazard. And you could tell that there had been plenty of rock falls and rock slides. The trail had to be rerouted in that area. There was a camp called Dick's Creek Camp, which honestly, I kind of wish we'd stayed there. I mean, I don't regret it because it would have just added more mileage to our last day and we didn't really need that. But it was like right on the edge of the glacier. And I don't know that you actually would have had a good view from any of the campsites, but you certainly would have had a good view from the toilet. How do I know that? Because it was right next to the trail.
And I just couldn't believe that we had a 2 glacier day like this. So the view of the Carbon Glacier was similar to the glacier that we'd been looking at earlier. And it was the same kind of, like with the rock covering the end of it. And the glacier probably was still like 50 feet high or not high, if not higher. Every once in a while you'd hear rocks kind of tumbling down because everything is, melting and shifting and changing. And like Carrie mentioned, it was important for us to just keep moving because we wanted to get to our camp. We wanted to beat any rain. We wanted to not have any rocks fall on us, but it was an area that I would have loved to just stand and appreciate. And I don't know if we've talked about this time-lapse video on our podcast before, but there's a photographer that does some work with National Geographic named Andrew Studer, and he did this project several years ago where he and I think another photographer did a time lapse on one of the glaciers on Mount Baker for I don't know if it was like 3 weeks. And so when they published the video, you can actually see the glacier flow down the mountain, which is the most fascinating video to me. And so it's just cool to be standing at the base of something that big that's carving away at a massive mountain like Mount Rainier.
We finally made it to the suspension bridge where we were going to cross this creek that comes from the Carbon Glacier, aka the Carbon River. And honestly, after our first suspension bridge experience, which was cool but also a little bit scary, I was kind of like, ooh, this is going to be a suspension bridge, what's it like? And it was genuinely like a suspension bridge in miniature compared to the other one. I mean, it was still, a respectably sized, a respectable length of a suspension bridge, but after that mega suspension bridge, it was like, oh, I can probably cross this one in like 1 minute, versus I feel like it took a couple minutes to cross that other one. And so that was kind of cool. Even though the fog was coming in, you could see some really good fall colors kind of blanketing the hillsides. So that was exciting. So Molly crossed first this time. I don't know if she just didn't want to watch everybody do it and then go, but Molly crossed first and then myself and then Rachel. And we were getting really close to our camp at that point. So there, you actually have to turn off to go to the campsite that we stayed at, which would be the Carbon River Camp. And we turned off and I thought it was just going to be right around the corner, but you have to cross this really beautiful log bridge with a gorgeous waterfall. And it's kind of like, oh, that's so fun. And then you are walking through this forest that's, of course, incredibly wet. Like, you're not even wet yet because the precipitation hasn't started, but all of the leaves and plants are just soaking you. So that was kind of like, this seems unfair. And we walk and we finally get to our camp, which I think must have been like 0.4 miles at least, if not a half mile off the trail. So we get to the camp, and the first campsite's not taken. Actually, none of them are. But the first campsite's kind of So then we go to the next campsite, and it didn't look like it would fit 2 tents very well. There was a group campsite that looked awesome. But for some reason, we always didn't take the group campsite because you're not supposed to. But also, I never saw a group there the entire trip. So I don't know if there were no groups at that point. But we went to the final campsite, and oh my goodness, you had to just walk and get all this extra vertical. And we finally said, we're just staying at campsite number 1. So we went back, I guess we didn't. We pitched our tents, I think, because that way we could actually take a little weight out of our packs. Because we couldn't leave our packs alone. And then by that time, I think it had been like lightly misting. So we all went down, filtered water for tomorrow.
Wow, that was cold when you're filtering water and you're squeezing it out of a collection bag, and the water is the ambient air temperature was probably like mid 40s and the water temperature was probably the same. That is a recipe for some very cold hands. And another thing, when we were at our campsite, someone must have someone did something to a wasp's nest, because when we first got there, there was like a wasp nest that looked like it was partially burned sitting on like a tree trunk.
I'd actually read a comment on Far Out saying there had been a wasp's nest under the toilet. So I was a little scared to use the toilet there. So someone must have, I don't know how you transport a wasp's nest all the way from like the toilet to the campsite, because they were pretty far away,
and then put it on the log that I would use to eat my food.
Yeah, so I think that did factor into when we first did not want to stay there, but then we found out we did want to stay at that camp spot. So we decided to have dinner, and Rachel's dinner unfortunately was going to be chili again. So she decided that she didn't want to risk it, and she had, I think, we had some extra tortilla pizza stuff, because we had decided, we'll try to get an early start tomorrow and go quick so that we can just eat lunch in Leavenworth or somewhere that's an actual town, because this was our last night, you guys. So we made our dinner and everybody ate, and then it started to kind of precipitate, and I felt like it was a pretty light precipitation. But then we all went to the toilet together naturally, because it honestly was such a dense forest right there, and we were all alone, and it just felt creepy. And the toilet had like this little wall by it, so I guess that people don't have to see you, but it just felt creepy. So we all went together, and then on our way back, we were all singing the We Don't Need No Trouble song really loud, because we had no neighbors at all, and it just felt so creepy, like we were going to run into I don't know what. And it's funny, because when we were coming back from the toilet, remember we like took the wrong branch and went the wrong way for a little bit, and then had to turn around, come back, and go to the correct direction.
And how funny, because like all the years we've tried to get the Wonderland Trail permit and then never been able to put together an itinerary. And of course we are in the 1st of October now, so it's getting to be pretty late season. But how hilarious to be staying at the Carbon River camp, and out of maybe 4 campsites, we were the only people there.
Yeah, actually though.
And once again, like Carrie said, it's like a deep forest, and you felt like you were in the middle of nowhere.
Definitely felt kind of creepy, but it was also a beautiful campsite. It just was the vibe that night. And like I said, it didn't feel like it was precipitating that hard, but when I look at the video I was taking when we were walking back from the toilet, it actually was raining quite hard. We were all getting very wet, so it was like as soon as we got back to our tents, everybody in your tents. And I had wrote in my journal that the next day we were hoping to go to Spray Park, which is supposed to be a really beautiful spot on the Wonderland Trail, but we decided that we weren't going to take the Spray Park alternate if there was a ton of rain and clouds, because it's actually just a higher alternate. We would just go straight to Mowich Lake on the Wonderland Trail. And I wrote this in my journal. I said, really enjoying this long time with very little service and don't want it to end, but looking forward to civilization. And I think that really is just like the dichotomy of the experiences of trail, where on the one hand, you just love it so much. And I was really treasuring not having service. Like, it's nice to have the inReach because you can text your mom every day, just let her know you're fine. And, you know, like, you still have that piece of the world that you're attached to, but there's no I don't know, there's just like no pressures, it feels like, other than the moments that you're living there. But also on the other hand, you do kind of miss the comforts of a warm bed, dry clothes, toilets,
Non-creepy toilets.
soap and water and running water. So yeah, we were definitely sad that the adventure was going to end, but also grateful for the time we'd had on it.
And hoping that we'd have the chance to check out Spray Park the next day, which we felt like could be a highlight of the trip, but we were only going to go there if there was good weather, and we were not going to do it if it was socked in and raining.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Two Sisters on Adventures if you want to see pictures and videos of the things we talked about today, especially the toothbrush video. And also, please feel free to follow us on or like subscribe to us on your wherever you're listening to this podcast. We appreciate you guys. Bye.